Well, hello and welcome to Rajat TV. You're watching the big picture with me, Rajat Kain. In this edition of the show, we'll talk about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with top political leaders of Jammu and Kashmir at his Delhi residence. Now, 14 mainstream Jammu and Kashmir leaders from 8 political parties that also include 4 chief ministers took part in meeting aimed at discussing the political process ahead. The meeting will be first such gathering since Centre announced abrogation of Jammu and Kashmir special status and its bifurcation into union territories in August of 2019. So how important does this meeting hold for the region and for the politics ahead? To discuss further on this issue, we're joined with 2 senior journalists, Smita and Mishra. Many thanks for joining us, ma'am, and Mr. K.V. Prasad, another senior journalist. Many thanks, Mr. Prasad, for joining us. Let me start with you, Mr. Prasad. How much of importance is to be subscribed to such a meeting, and how important is it for the state?
Well, I think the importance is the fact that the Prime Minister of India has called for this meeting at the highest political level. This meeting has been called, and as you mentioned in your introductions, this comes almost 2 years after the abrogation of Article 370. And I think one of the big things that the government would explore, and what we read in the reports in the last few days, is the restoration of the political process, which is one of the primary agendas that is going to be looked at. And how will that go forward? Because it's last year, everybody has lost time because of the pandemic. And the issue, of course, starts with the legal technicality in terms of the delimitation process that needs to be completed and then take it forward. And of course, these parties have been there in Jammu and Kashmir for a pretty long time and have been active. Many of them have run governments. In fact, most of them have been in the governments. So that is the primary goal, as it looks like, taking the process forward, because what the Home Minister said on the floor of the House in Parliament, in both in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, when the abrogation in Article 370 was removed, there were many roadmap which was made clear. So I think this is taking that process on that map.
Right, absolutely. Thanks, Mr. Prasad, for opening remarks. Smita Mishra, to you. Ma'am, in terms of the roadmap ahead, I know the meeting is yet to be concluded, and of course we'll get to know about the finer prints and details in time to come as to who said what and which party's stand was what on an issue to say of. But collectively, I mean, all these political parties coming under one umbrella and of course now meeting with the Prime Minister. In terms of the finer prints, what could be on the table, ma'am?
If you want to know really on the finer prints, I would suggest we must wait for a while, because this is a brainstorming. It is a meeting of people from various political viewpoints who have come together after a pretty long time. It's nearly 2 years, 22, 23 months have gone by. Apart from the changes that have taken place in the dispensation, in the entire setup of Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, we have also battled a very aggressive pandemic in the meantime. So I would say we must wait a little to understand the finer prints. However, just because the finer prints are still to come out, that doesn't in any way reduce the significance of this initiative. Let me tell you that this initiative has been welcomed by people. May have divergent views and expectations, but so far as the significance of the initiative goes, nobody has played it down, which only goes to confirm that such an initiative has been welcomed and was being awaited by everybody. So to that extent, I would not like to repeat what our senior Mr. Prasad has already underlined, about the beginning of a political process. I only say that with some baby steps, a political process has already been on in the region, in Jammu Kashmir. We saw the DDC elections. People may have diverted two views on the DDC elections, but we cannot play down the fact that people participated in the polls. And there are representatives out there who are working for their voters, for the area. Now, this being a very significant first initiative, I would say, while we have to understand the significance of starting this political process, and I'm sure there is a very interesting roadmap ahead of us. However, Mr. Kain, I would not like to pack too much into this one first meeting. Okay.
Right.
I think this meeting will serve and is to serve as a true icebreaker, because a lot of things which may be playing in the minds of people get cleared only when they sit across the table, they listen to each other. Nothing, let me repeat, nothing can replace a healthy human conversation. So, but then, every time there is a fresh initiative, it is human nature to sometimes overhype things and perhaps jump the gun. And that is something we have been seeing for the past few days already in the media circles and among commentators and analysts. I would, however, not like to pack too many expectations into this first meeting. And perhaps over the show, we'll be discussing some of those. So yes, it is a very interesting, very welcome first initiative. And that is why even people having extreme political views have decided to join the process. It only goes to show that they are all ready to get themselves involved in whatever initiative is on the cards. So let us not overhype the outcome of the meeting. But at the same time, we must understand that the people of Jammu and Kashmir have something to look forward to, again, apart from all that has been done in the past months.
Smita, before I go off to Mr. Prasad, just one small question to you. Interestingly, you called it an icebreaker and also brainstorming. At the same point, you're raising a caveat that not much of, say, conclusion could be expected from it. Of course, like there'll be several rounds of meetings and possibly one-on-one. How important is it, therefore, to have the local representation from the state for any, say, further political process to be in the anvil?
First of all, Mr. Kain, please do not misunderstand me. I would not like to preempt what the road further will be, in the sense who will be holding meetings and who will be meeting.
No, certainly not. I'm just talking about the local representation.
I can only hazard a guess that this is not going to be the end of the road. It is actually going to be the beginning of a very interesting track forward. To that extent, let us welcome this move, and everybody has welcomed it. About representation from local people, local leadership, I think they are all already there. Because of the pandemic, I have not seen such a healthy, such a big gathering at the Prime Minister's residence for a long time. So I think people from all regions, all areas. And it is not only the area representation, it is the divergence of the political viewpoint. They are all present there. I am sure they are voicing their concerns, their hopes, their aspirations. And this is how it should be. Everybody should have an opportunity to voice the aspirations of their respective areas. And I'm sure something very interesting must come out.
Right. Thank you, Smita, for your opening remarks. Certainly, I'll come back to you. Mr. Prasad, do you also agree that this is just the baby steps, as just to quote what Smita said, and of course, we'll have more such forums ahead, whereby having a local representation as well, so as to carve the way ahead of Jammu and Kashmir, the political process of the state.
If you mean by local representation is the people who are elected to DDC in particular, who have been, we have seen the elections.
It's the whole gamut, sir. It's the whole gamut, starting from, the councillors to...
The point is, at this point of time, the government of India has invited leaders of major political parties who have had presence in the erstwhile state, the Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh areas, which we know earlier. Now, it is important for them to assess as to what the people who have, as I said, if you notice, 4 former chief ministers are present in the meeting right now, right? The one which is on at the Prime Minister's house, members of a union cabinet or a union council of ministers are there who are from the region. Then you have the political party representatives who may not be in the government at some point of time, but are there. So there are voices representing various shades and various opinions. Now, how does the government want to take it forward from here to expand to what we said, whether the councillors would be called or other representatives will be called? It will start. The government will have to make itself say how does it want to take the process forward. What we have seen is the first step after the DDC polls. If one looks at that, but this is a different format in the sense you have leaders of various political parties, as I mentioned, who have been in the government so it is significant to that extent. As I said, the next component could be somebody is quite sure, and it will all depend on what kind of outcomes would one see from this. If it is an exploratory talk, a heart-to-heart talk from leaders, because we already heard leaders like Farooq Abdullah and others say what they had said in Srinagar yesterday, that they were going to Delhi and talk to the Prime Minister and say what they have to say. Now, that will be their viewpoint. And once the government hears it, obviously they'll have something to say, take it forward. And I showed how the format, I'm not very clear as of now for me to say. Surely there should be more meetings in a democratic engagement.
Right.
The more you talk, the more clarity you get.
Right. But Mr. Prasad, let me just ask you one small question here. Like, we have seen that there are several parties here, 8 parties in all, of course, and there are 14 leaders from these 8 parties, including 4 former chief ministers who have served the state. They know state well. We have seen, say, there are divergence of views among those 8 parties who have been, who are like the state-based. So is it possible to get them at one level? And basically, if we need to move forward for a political process, how much importance do you subscribe to having a parity between those parties?
See, politics, as they say, is the art of possibilities. So you always keep exploring what are the possibilities, number one. Number two, every political party will have a definite program and definite policy through which they come. But when you come to a talks, everybody has a position. So that position is put forward. And from there on, everybody tries to see what are the points of convergence. And that's where a consensus emerges. We see that happen all the time, right from parliament to legislatures to probably even at homes. So you have different points of view, but at some point of time, we'll all say, okay, we're going to agree on a certain set of things that this can be doable. So let's move forward. So that comes out of talks and a consensus that emerges. And it is only such talks which allow you to, as Smita was using a brainstorming session. So you kind of sense and sound out each other as to what are we looking at. And once you come at a particular area that, okay, this is something we can tick this box and move forward. That's how it comes. As I said, whether this is the first round, second round, more rounds, I think we'll have to wait a little more patiently to see how it moves forward.
Right. Ma'am, Smita Mishra, just prior to this meeting, there was a couple of statements, the interview statement from Jammu and Kashmir Governor LG, Mr. Manoj Sinha. There is a great emphasis and stress on the democratic process in the state, and he congratulated the public of state. Of course, like DDC polls were held, the Delimitation Commission is doing its work, as he mentioned. At the same time, there is he also urged involvement of maximum number of people. So in days to come, do we see more and more stakeholders or parties joining the process, rather say democratic process of the state ahead?
Yes, I quite understand what Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha ji must have wanted to stress in his statement. You see, let us not forget the fact that all through the decades when Article 370 was in effect, a very large section of the people of Jammu Kashmir were deprived of very important constitutional rights. A lot of benefits, a lot of things which the rest of the citizens in the rest of the country have been enjoying. I have been a resident of J&K, one of those residents who did not have the state resident certificate, or what was there referred to as state subject, after the accession. So it was really not a complete accession in constitutional terms. And I have seen people, various segments of society, women particularly. I have been through a lot of experiences myself when not having a state subject was so degrading and demeaning for a citizen, because you were deprived of things which rightfully every citizen of India is entitled to. So therefore, when Lieutenant Governor Sinha stresses on involvement of a bigger number of people, of more people coming to participate in the democratic process to avail the benefits of development, their constitutional rights, I fully understand what he's trying to say. And that is why this is on the basis of actual feedback. I can tell you, and I can vouch for it, that the people are very happy with the way things have been moving there, even during the challenging times of COVID. Like rest of the country, Jammu and Kashmir regions have also faced a very serious COVID challenge. And therefore, this also underscores the next step that we are moving on to. We know for sure that a process of delimitation is already on at the district level. Meetings are being held. The administration is seized of the matter. They are working for it. And an assembly with the UT status that currently has been said has been effected. The election to that, fresh elections to that assembly are going to be possible once this process of delimitation is completed, which, by the way, I would like to stress that a process of delimitation has been on the cards. And this has been a demand of a very large section of the people in Jammu Kashmir, particularly post-90s, because of various reasons. Militancy, terrorism in the Kashmir Valley. We often like to stress only on the migration and the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits. That, of course, is a blot on our country, on that area, which we can never forget. However, let us remember that the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits is not the only kind of migration that took place, okay? Ever since violence took over the valley, the beautiful Kashmir Valley, a lot of people who are Muslims, who profess the majority religion in that part of the country, they also moved out and migrated themselves. Many of them moved away their children and families. Many of them, they moved away lock, stock and barrel for the simple reason that nobody wants to live in the middle of violence because it completely shatters your life. So migration was not limited to Kashmiri Pandits. There has been migration from all segments of society. And that is why the nature of the constituencies in Jammu Kashmir, which has been on the pattern of the old delimitation, is certainly not feasible at all, because it is not representative anymore. A fresh delimitation is completely necessary there, because the demographics and the population of various areas has changed from what it used to be. The population is not what it used to be a few decades ago. Hence, for proper representation, for the voters to exercise their rights in a fair and just manner, a fresh delimitation is the need of the hour. And it's a very good sign that the administration is already working on it. And I think as soon as the delimitation process is completed with the cooperation of the people, we can look forward to elections to the Assembly of the Union Territory.
Well, you already answered my question I was about to ask, rather supplementary to this, whether thanks, Smita. Dr. K. Prasad, your view on delimitation, do we see a political process or the poll process post that? I mean, once the entire exercise conclude, of course, like this will take time. It's fairly gigantic exercise, I believe.
It has to happen. It's a logical conclusion, because once the delimitation process is over and once the constituents are determined, they're notified and gazetted. So once that new set of things is, it's very natural that the government then decides to move for holding elections on the basis of fresh, the delimited for new constituencies and the updation that needs to take place with the electoral rolls, with the Election Commission obviously takes care of by its regular mechanisms. So this is a natural policy for process, as the process of delimitation itself takes time, because it's a long drawn process where a certain set of boundaries are created, and objections are invited. Then there are people who sit down and discuss as to why a particular locality should be there or should not be there. So all these discussions happen in a very open manner, and this happens very. So this is something which has to go through, and I'm sure that process is underway already. We've heard this before, and that's something that is going on. It's how soon they can complete the task in the thing, and then the other technicalities, as a technicalities, as I said, the election commission updating of the electoral rolls if it's required, and so on and so forth. So this is something, and remember, earlier there used to be a limitation in terms of weather. Sometimes after November, when weather sets in, the cold weather sets in after October, the process of holding elections in certain parts of the state was not taken up. But with new kind of things. So, I mean, these are in the domain of election commission to take a call. And of course, the most important thing always that has been in the state of erstwhile state and now the Union Territory is security, because the level of terrorism is what is important, and security forces are required in adequate numbers to ensure that the free and fair electoral process is the sanctity of free and fair polls is upheld. People come out and vote without any fear. So this is not the first time we will be having elections when they are ready with this process. So we have done it in the past. So the election commission has enough data and and that needs to be updated and taken forward.
Right. Okay, Mr. K.V. Prasad, like just a small question here. So, I mean, so how do you rate the current security situation in the state, right?
No, we just read what we read. If the reports say there is a lull in activity, and fortunately we've seen that there has been some welcome developments on the border with Pakistan in particular coming into the ceasefire thing, coming into force, because in the past the kind of violations sometimes that took place, especially we read reports from the border security force and the people guarding the at the security level, that infiltrations would take place under the cover of fire and so on and so forth. So all those are data which is available in the Home Ministry and other various state intelligence people. So that is where we need to look at the number of incidents. We read it regularly. So that is something that the state police and the state government and the state intelligence will be able to provide it a much easier. And they do it quite regularly with the people at the Union Home Ministry.
Right. Smita, as we are about to close the show, just one last question to you, ma'am, and please just conclude here. As you mentioned in one of your replies, that people are happy with development work in the state post-abrogation. Of course, like they have access to basic facilities which they were deprived of prior to having abrogation of Article 370 in the state. Now, how important is it to have a security in right place for economic activities, for development activities to continue? Will security remain a great driver in the state in times to come?
No, absolutely. I mean, security is the first prerequisite, for people to live, first of all, a normal life, and then to progress, for their businesses, for their jobs, for their work, for the future of their children. I have seen in the valley and even in many parts of the Jammu region, when Jammu Kashmir was facing very extreme level of violence, and there were regular attacks in all kinds of public places. I have seen how the factories, they started shutting down one by one. People were laid off, and even traders, who had the courage to keep their business establishments open. Every time there was an attack, there would be a band and there would be protests, and then there would be a lot of cordon and search, and establishments had to close down, and then there were very strict hours to open. It was not like Delhi or Mumbai or Bangalore where you can have your business establishments open till as long as you want. You see, these are very small issues which never find space in our newspapers and television. But it is these very small things which hamper the optimum growth of a society, of an area. A city going indoors at 4 o'clock and another city being outdoors till 12 in the midnight, it affects the business and the revenue of the place. You understand?
Absolutely.
Similarly, in education, in schools, in every walk of life. So therefore, I don't think, we can, we cannot discount the importance of security in our lives, and more so in a border area where our neighboring country is trying to push terror and violence 24/7 into our land. So therefore, touch wood, I would like to say that the lull in the violence in the areas of Jammu Kashmir is a very, very relieving news, very welcome news. And
Right.
we hope that with our security establishment keeping perfect vigil, it is going to be like this. And when you look at the security scenario coupled with the efforts to push development, down to the last man standing there, I think it is finally the time for a new dawn in the areas of Jammu Kashmir, God willing.
Well, that's it. Smita, thanks for summing it up, and many thanks, Mr. Prasad. So there we have these two senior journalists elucidating on important aspects and several dimensions of the state, especially in the wake of all-party meeting called by Prime Minister at his residence. Well, that's it in this edition of Big Picture. Thanks for watching our show. Stay tuned to Rajat TV. Goodbye.